Welcome to the Living in Chicago podcast, where I get to interview real Chicagoans about the neighborhoods that they live, work, and play in. My name is Jake Lyons. I'll be your host, and in this episode, I am interviewing Jay Towns. Jay is a professional photographer. He's an advertising creative, and he is also an up-and-coming actor living in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. If you're unfamiliar with Lincoln Park, it is the neighborhood, pretty much the first real neighborhood just north of like downtown, what most people would probably regard as downtown Chicago. So if you have the Loop, which is the heart of downtown Chicago, and then the River North near North Side area, just to the north of that, you have Lincoln Park. So it starts becoming a little less high rises, a little bit more houses, townhouses, graystones, like 2 to 6-ish unit buildings. There are still the occasional high rises along, especially along the lake, but for the most part, it starts to open up a little bit and become a little less dense and more parks, more green, things like that. It's famous for the Lincoln Park Zoo, and there's some beachfront, there's some marinas, there's some beautiful parkland right along the lake onto the east side of Lincoln Park. And then so it starts the south border is starts at North Avenue, I believe, and then I believe the north dividing border is Diversey Avenue, and then it goes from the lake inland to I didn't look this up exactly, but the way I always think of it is Clybourne Avenue is kind of the western dividing line. If that's not entirely accurate, let me know in the comments, or I'll check this in Google Maps and either say, great, I was right, or dang, I'm gonna look stupid. But I think that's right. In any case, yeah, it's a pretty big area. It goes a couple miles inland. There's lots of different ways to experience Lincoln Park, lots of different kind of vibes in the different subsections throughout the broader category of Lincoln Park. But in terms of what's it actually like to live there, I will go ahead and stop talking now and defer to Jay Town to tell us what it's like to live in Lincoln Park and some of the other neighborhoods that he has lived in his still somewhat relatively brief time living in Chicago, though he definitely has a lot to say about it, and I think he'll get a lot out of it. So without further ado, here is Jay. All right, pleased to be joined here today by Jay Towns, who is a bit of a renaissance man in all kinds of artistic endeavors. He is a advertising copywriter, a photographer, an actor. He has an IMDb profile, which is that in itself. I don't know, maybe I'm a little too easily impressed, but I was impressed by that because I just don't know many people who even have an IMDb profile. He is a resident of the Lincoln Park neighborhood, but he's been in a couple different areas too. And yeah, that's what I have for now. What did I miss? What would you like the audience to know about you right off the bat?
Oh, well, I guess, to add to my title, you could add "Flattered by Jake Lyons" because that was very sweet of you. And to be honest, I think the IMDb profile was a huge deal to me too when I saw it, so you're not alone. It's pretty cool.
S So how does that work? You don't make it yourself? You have to kinda does somebody make it for you and it just kinda pops out of no what is that world like?
Yeah, so I'm not like a high ticket actor, I would say. So I manage my own profile now, but you can't they populate automatically if the project that you worked on was like officially logged with IMDb. So there's like a whole process.
Mm,
So once my first project was on there, then my account existed with my name in the credits and I could kind of opt into owning my account. But like a lot of the bigger actors, like they don't manage their own, like their managers do.
of
But
cour
I don't have that luxury.
yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's so cool. So are you in, like, the Actors Guild and all that stuff now, or does that is that kinda separate still?
It's so I'm SAG E, which is Screen Actors Guild eligible, but in
Mm,
Chicago specifically, I the advice that I got and that I believe is that personally for my line of work and all the other things I do, it wouldn't really make sense to go into the guild. You have to kind of pay you have to pay to join, and then if you are a union actor, you can't act on non-union projects, and most of the projects in Chicago
mm,
are union, so it wouldn't really make
okay,
sense for me.
okay. That makes sense. I'm not in that world, but if I was, I feel like I would wanna be in some kinda union just if for no other reason, just to get all the screeners for, like,
Yeah.
awards and stuff. Because my wife's dad is in the Actors Guild, and he gets whenever they're voting for, like, SAG awards or whatever, he gets screeners for every movie that came out, and it's just like, "Man, if I had this, this would be amazing." I mean, I guess we all have streaming services and stuff now, so I guess it's not as cool now, but it's still I don't know. It's still
No,
kinda cool.
that's cool. I don't even know all the perks that go into it, honestly, so maybe I should check it out.
Well, you seem to know what you're doing and what's best for you. I'm just, saying random stuff here, but, before we get too far down any one road, so tell us a little bit about where you're from, what brought you to Chicago to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. My mom's family's from there. Then I moved to Milwaukee for a bit of my early childhood for a few years, which is where my dad's from. My dad's work brought him downtown Chicago a lot. So we'd be traveling down and back. He'd be traveling a lot. So right around when I was in middle school, my parents were like, what if we just kind of split the difference between St. Louis and Milwaukee and met in the middle and hung out in Chicago for a little bit? So I grew up in Schaumburg, which is a western suburb, Cook County, and that's where I went to high school, middle school, the rest of middle school. And then I eventually, when I was applying for colleges and stuff, I was thinking, I'm gonna go out to the coast, like I'm gonna be warm. I was thinking going to Florida, maybe doing some cool stuff in New York, but actually ended up in Evanston, Illinois at Northwestern, which is just north of the city. So it turned out that, the majority of my life I've actually lived in proximity to Chicago. And then after graduating from Northwestern, I moved down to the city and officially secured my Chicago zip code.
Okay, right on. Do you still think about one of the coasts, or you pretty set in Chicago for now?
Oh no, I love Chicago, man. Especially to live in. I just feel like it's still so underrated, which is so fine to me.
Mhm,
But I think that, yeah, I mean, when you're looking at just a metropolis like Chicago, I love a big city. Third biggest city in the US. And compared to New York, I think we've got some decent public transportation, which is a big deal to me, but at half the price of living. And then I love LA. I'm not gonna lie. Really big LA fan. Love the weather,
mhm,
love the vibes. But yeah, it's a lot of driving and it's really expensive and never has made much sense to me. But I also understand that to me, Chicago is not just not the other two. I think Chicago has a
mhm.
very cool vibe about it, which is that people like me, I think, get to thrive a lot. People who don't maybe have one lane that they're super into, and maybe I don't want to go up to New York and be a super intense investment banker, or I don't only want to be an actor among actors in LA. I think Chicago is a place that has something for everyone, especially in creative spaces. And that's why I've decided to build the beginning of my career here.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I've had a number of creative types on the show so far, and not even people that have been on the show, but people I just, talk to. My wife is an artist, so I'm somewhat in those spaces, and I hear a lot of people talk about how the community of artistic types in Chicago is just very robust compared to maybe some of these other places that, while maybe the opportunities are technically more abundant in other places, depending on how you look at that, it's also much more cutthroat, and it's just a much different sort of way of existing about that space than it is here. I don't
Exactly.
know if you've ran into that.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. I mean, your wife's an artist, so I won't beat the dead horse, but that's exactly how I feel.
Good. Good, good. And you are in the Lincoln Park neighborhood? That's right, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What are you thinking of that place? What drew you to Lincoln Park versus some other places?
Well, I moved to Lincoln Park from West Loop, which was the first neighborhood I moved into. And that was pretty relevant because I don't think I would have chosen to move into Lincoln Park straight from school. Or when I moved to Chicago, I don't think I understood exactly what function it played in the neighborhood scene, at least how I interpret it. But actually, to me, where I'm living now is kind of more of a reactive to my experience in West Loop. So the reason that I chose to move to Lincoln Park was because I wanted to feel a bit more of a neighborhood vibe to my living space. I felt like West Loop was dope. It's got a reputation for being like a pretty bougie area, unfortunately gentrified, but to the effect of all of the the tech bros and big ticket, big budget people living out there. I really
Mhm,
love the Fulton Market area. But when it came to like my living situation, I felt pretty secluded. Like it's not along any of the main train lines, red line, brown line, where people are, traveling mostly. And I felt that even though I was having a good time where I was living, I liked my apartment and all that, it did feel removed from the city experience, and I think that, especially my first year out of college, it was just a bit too secluded for my liking, so perhaps I'll return, but Lincoln Park, I think, has a really nice neighborhood feel. I know the people that live near me, I know the people who run the shops around me, and I'm really close to the train. I can go easily up to my friends on the north side and the south side, so o overall, logistically, it just makes more sense, and the deal that I'm getting on my real estate is better. So I'm paying less,
mhm.
experiencing more. So that's a win-win for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kinda it Only if you're comparing it to the West Loop, I think, could you say that that Lincoln Park, you get more bang for the buck, because Lincoln Park is
That's
also
fair.
not like
That's fair.
a cheap place to live by any means, but I mean, yeah, that's yeah. No, that makes sense, and yeah, that's interesting that you felt more secluded in the West Loop. I guess just even though there's probably it's the West Loop is more dense, but I guess it's just kind of like you feel like you're getting lost in the shuffle maybe a little bit more there.
Yeah, it totally depends on who you're around. If all my homies were living there, probably wouldn't be a problem, but I was one of the only people from the groups that I was moving around in, a lot,
Mhm.
lived out there. So it was always difficult for me to go meet up with others, and it didn't really incentivize people to come visit me very much. I felt like, who to share this experience with? I felt like
Right.
Rapunzel stuck up in her tower a little.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would imagine depending on where in Lincoln Park is I guess Lincoln Park's a pretty big area, and I don't know exactly where you are, but I mean, I could just see how that wouldn't necessarily, like, jive with because you're pretty new out of college, right? How old are you?
Yeah, I'm 23 and I graduated in the
Okay.
class of 22, so not even 2
Yeah.
years ago yet. I feel very comfortable with Chicago vibes. Like I said, I've been around, but in terms of, yeah, finding your network, just figuring out if I'm sure as you can recall, like the transition from being in a school mindset to being an adult just in and of itself was the tricky part. And then it just didn't make it easier to be doing it mostly alone, I think. But yeah, to your effect, I won't obviously reveal too much about exactly where I'm located, but
Yeah,
the
no addresses
sentiments
or
that
anything, yeah.
the sentiments that you shared about the nature of the people that are around certain areas definitely has resonated. I feel like I'm around a younger crowd, and younger doesn't always mean better, but it's like more of a peer structure, I think always helps.
Mhm. What are some of the, local spots, hidden gems, restaurants, shops, things like that that you're taking a liking to?
Dude, yeah. Okay, well, okay. Oh gosh, I should have thought about this. I do love Cafe Babariba. This is the
Mhm.
exact opposite of a hidden gem. Like everybody knows about it. It's awesome, but the
Yeah.
truth is it's awesome. So, but I don't know, maybe you could help me out, but I think there's a There's a cafe it's on Fullerton, I think, near the DePaul campus. It's something pig maybe, but basically it's just got a really cozy vibe. Like you wind through hallways and you can sit anywhere. It's very antique-y, and I think they have a speakeasy that they do on nights as well. And that place I just went to recently, very cool vibe. Never been to a place like that. Um,
Oh, the bourgeois pig?
Bourgeois pig,
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah,
finding.
the Gatsby
Yeah.
is the speakeasy, actually. It's actually really funny that you bring that up because I was actually supposed to today, after this interview, I was supposed to have an interview with the main bartender at the for the Gatsby.
Oh, that's sick. Yeah, what do we
Yeah,
have?
that's some, fantastic synergy there. We had to reschedule, but, yeah, I'm gonna have him on the show eventually. He's really cool and,
Oh,
obviously a hell of a mixologist.
yeah,
I don't
yeah, I check that out. Never been to the
it's
speakeasy.
really cool.
Yeah, but I think that's the place with more character than I've seen in most, areas in Lincoln Park. Yeah, lots of great food spots. I'll this place because small businesses goes a long way. This place, Jaimitos Burritos it's like on Sheffield and, like it's on Sheffield and Clybourne intersection, just some of the best burritos. They're open till like 3 AM. Many a drunk night I have wandered their halls and can never go wrong. Love that
Yeah.
place as well. Lincoln Park's got some cool spots.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Do you ever, I mean, you're a photographer, right? So what kind of photography do you do?
I do mostly headshots and events.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds about right. Do you ever, have you taken much advantage of just the Chicago backdrops with your
Oh, yeah.
photography, or are they kinda more like indoor stuff?
It's funny because so I try to do controlled environments as much as possible. I've got my own lighting, but I love to use natural light when I can. Number 1, it's less work. Number 2, it just feels better. It's really
Mhm.
difficult to light artificially, but make it look natural, so I always prefer to do that. I think the trickiest part with Chicago is the weather at any given time. Shooting outside is just not a good idea, but people love the skyline. I think people
Mhm.
ask about the skyline more than they actually want the skyline in their picture, but is it is cool, and I think another perspective that I don't think people think about a lot, but what's been cool about photography is that shooting for, like, firms that are based in the city, from inside, the view outside of a tall building is very interesting, and I like that look. Depending on if you're looking north or south, you're getting completely different views. The city looks way different from inside, and I think that's a really
Mm.
underrated view of the city, so I've enjoyed that.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. Could see that for sure. I mean, yeah, that's why views are very important. I mean, as a real estate agent, I can tell you people
Mm.
really care about what view they're paying for.
I was gonna say, my first apartment, I loved the windows, they were, like, really big and, more than the view, it was a southern view from the
Mhm.
West Loop, so it wasn't, like, super crazy, but what I loved was how much sunlight I got all day, every day. So that was I didn't how big that was of a deal that was, and I didn't pay attention to it when I was looking for an apartment, so I'm glad that worked out. I'm now definitely aware of that.
Yeah, tuned into that reality a little bit more for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I brought that up because I know, I mean, Lincoln Park has just so many very picturesque, scenic little nooks and crannies from the park, the zoo, that bridge that goes over that little pond where I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
the
Yeah,
bridge.
I mean, there's just so many things going on there. But I don't know, do you spend much time like in the park, the zoo, anything like that?
Yeah, well, I actually ran my first marathon last October, which was
Oh,
super
nice.
and I mean, it was terrible to train for. I'm glad I did it and all that, but a really cool byproduct of that experience was as my mileage was increasing, I began to run more and more through the city and got, again, a really unique perspective on a lot of Lincoln Park and up the lake, past Lakeview and Andersonville and Buena Park and
Mhm.
all of that. And so, again, like, that view of the city the side, like, very cool. I'll also say, I know you didn't specifically ask about this, but going back to views, I think my number 1 favorite view of Chicago, period,
Mhm.
is I started running when I lived in West Loop, so I would run actually from the river walk, and I'd run south toward the Field Museum, and
Okay.
the best view was at the in the afternoon, running back up north from the Field Museum. You're looking north from south, and you see the entire expanse of downtown, and when the sun is setting too, over on the west, it's like the
Yeah.
Chicago view. I love it. I should have taken more pictures of it when I was running, but I was chronically out of
From the
breath.
Field Museum or from the MSI?
Oh gosh, let me check and make sure. I'm pretty sure am I thinking about the Museum of Science and Industry right now?
If you're coming up from, like, the Hyde Park area, is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about?
Let me
Like, from the south side?
yeah, yeah, it was oh, no, I'm thinking about the Field Museum, Shedd Aquarium, Adler
Okay,
Planetarium, that area, yeah. So right
okay,
near it wasn't too far south. Yeah, that's where I
okay,
was
gotcha. Cool, yeah, I could see that. I no, we can definitely talk about favorite views of the city. That's a good I like that topic 'cause I have 2. I have 2
okay,
favorite views, and
right here it is.
they both are sort of, like, indicative of, like, the panoramic, just whole you gonna see everything kinda thing.
Okay.
And one is the one that I thought you were actually talking about coming up from Hyde Park on Lakeshore Drive, up from, like, where the, Museum of Science and Industry is. There's
Mhm,
this specific, shoulder, just like this bend on the road where as you go around it, if you look slightly to your right, you see, like, Navy Pier to the right, and then just, like,
mhm.
the whole skyline kinda that's, like, looking up from, like, 3 miles south of the skyline, and for some reason, that one just always gets me. That one's just awesome.
I love that.
And then another one is actually coming when you're driving on 9094, kinda coming back from the airport, and you're
Okay.
driving
Yeah.
south. You're technically, it's east is like it's 90 east, but you're
Mhm,
driving south at that time, and that's where you get, like, you get the full panorama of even, like, all the hotels and apartment buildings and condo buildings and stuff that line, like, the Lakeshore Drive going all the way north and
mhm.
then linking to the actual downtown, River North and the Loop and all that. So it looks like you just have miles and miles of skyline from that view,
Yeah, yeah, no,
and
it's
that's
great.
just really cool.
I was gonna say honorable mention to
Yeah.
Lakeshore Drive, right when you're perpendicular to the Chicago River where it lets out, and you just see that opening into the loop.
Yeah.
I was driving with some friends back from, like, a road trip, and they were like and I was like, "Guys, when we go past here, you gotta take a look at this view." It was, like, nighttime or whatever. They're like, "Jay,
Mhm.
that is the most dad-coded thing you've ever done. Stop and look at the view." So I guess, I don't know, to my friends, I'm bringing the paternal vibes when I'm pointing out the view. But yeah, love Chicago. It's just such a pretty city.
If appreciation of beauty is suddenly a dad thing, I mean, whatever, I'll take it, like,
Right, you know what I mean?
whatever.
I was like, "Okay, all right."
Yeah. Yeah, whatever label you wanna put on that, I'll accept that label, so
Thank you, Jay.
that works. Yeah, I got your back. So you're talking about, like, when you're on Lakeshore and then you look down the river, and then
Yeah,
you see. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's ma It'd be maybe 10% better if that giant Trump sign wasn't, like, the first thing you saw when you looked down there, but, you know,
That
it is
what
what it
could you
is.
do, really?
Yeah, and I'd be saying that regardless of who Donald Trump is. It's just, like, a tacky thing to do just to
Sure,
put a
yeah,
giant name
but
on
just
there, you know,
big
but
big name on the side of the building, yeah,
yeah.
be
Like,
better.
it's a beautiful building otherwise. I mean,
Yeah,
say what you
yeah.
will about that man, that dude, he knows how to build a building.
Dude, I only learned this because I went on the Chicago architecture tour, but did you know, I think the person who designed, like, the Burj Khalifa or something like
Yes.
that designed that building as well, which is quite a range.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, definitely. Yep, that is a fact, and yeah, and, like, that building is really cool, like, the different you know how it had, like, different levels? Like,
Mhm.
the building, I don't know if they told you that on
Yeah.
the architecture tour, how, like, the different levels are meant to be as high as, like, other famous buildings, like, that are around it and stuff.
I didn't
So
know
there's,
that.
like, a lot of thought that goes into kind of every little detail of it, and yeah,
Huh.
we talk about the architecture tours a lot. I always tell people, like, if you only have a couple hours of free time to
Mhm.
spend, like, in a during an afternoon in Chicago, don't go out to eat, don't go to a museum, don't nothing, do the architecture tour,
Architecture
like,
tour. Yeah,
that's the thing to do.
I
Yeah.
will second that. It was really fun. Way more fun than I thought it was gonna be, to be honest.
Right, you hear, like, architecture tour, and you're just like, "What? Kinda
Right?
what is
Like,
that?" It sounds gonna be lame, but no, it is
that's
so
cool.
not lame at all. Time for the Real Estate Stats Corner, presented by me, Jake Lyons, real estate advisor in the Chicagoland area with At Properties and the ChicagoHomeSource.com. In this segment, I am going to provide three statistics that I believe will give you at least a general overview idea of what real estate stats or what real estate prices are going for in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago, since that is what we are talking about right now. As a real estate agent, I might be a little bit biased, but we're talking neighborhoods, and I think that real estate is very important to any discussion about any neighborhood because really, what is a neighborhood without real estate, right? So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. The stats that I am going to present are the median sales price as of the most recent data I have access to, which right now is February of 2024. So take that with however you will. This is the median sales prices for two-bed condos, the median sales price for all houses, single-family houses with at least three bedrooms, and then the median rent price, the median monthly rent price for a two-bed apartment. So the median sales price for a two-bed condo in Lincoln Park as of February 2024 is $475,000. So half sold for more, half sold for less. That is the price point that was right in the middle of all the condos that sold in Lincoln Park in February 2024. The median sales price for single family houses in Lincoln Park is $1.855 million. Lincoln Park, definitely one of the more pricey areas to get into in the city of Chicago. And then the price if you are looking to rent a two-bed apartment in the Lincoln Park neighborhood is $2,950. $2,950 is the median that you would expect to pay for a two-bed apartment in Lincoln Park. And there you have it. There is the Real Estate Stats Corner presented by Jake Lyons and the ChicagoHomeSource.com. If you want to see what all is available right now in the Lincoln Park area or anywhere in Chicago for that matter, you can go to the ChicagoHomeSource.com and there will also be a link in the show notes. What has been your experience of just like the safety levels and sort of the comfort from that point of view that you've experienced in the
Lincoln
neighborhoods you've
Park?
been in so far? Yeah, Lincoln Park, even West Loop, we can touch on. Just
Yes,
your Chicago
sure.
in general.
Well, it goes without saying, obviously, being a man in these situations is way different than being a woman. I'm not even aware of a lot of things that probably other people would notice, and I recognize that privilege. I appreciate that privilege. I was able to run, at night with no problems, nobody harassing me doing that. I feel like Lincoln Park is pretty safe. I think that especially because you've got this campus right in the middle of the neighborhood, just in general, there happens to be more like police and kind of like the presence of comfort or perceived comfort is good. A lot of families, it's very neighborhoody. So I think that a lot of things also get caught and noticed a lot. Like you said, it's not cheap to live in a lot of these areas, and the people who are paying to live in this area tend to want to keep it in an orderly fashion, for better or for worse. And I think that that makes me feel really safe in Lincoln Park. I think for West Loop, I was in the West Loop gate, so like the area in between the West Loop and the Loop. So it was
Mm.
mostly, office buildings, but there was some residential. And I lived close to Ogilvy Transportation Station and Union Station, so there was a lot of movement from Chicagoans, people from the suburbs, people not from Chicago. So I did run into a lot more interesting figures in those areas. I personally never had any problems, but for the record, I did hear a couple of times my apartment building notified us of some, unwelcome behavior on or near the residential properties. I think in general, just like most places near the central area of Chicago, obviously, going far north, far west, far south, you're going to have lots of different experiences. But by and large, just like any metropolitan area, being about your wits and maybe not listening to your music too loud or causing too much ruckus and drawing attention to yourself. These are things that I kind of just picked up over living in Chicago. Also, I've never had a platform to actually share this, but I actually do think that this is a reasonable hack. If you're watching and maybe concerned about drawing too much attention in Chicago, I think something really interesting that really drastically changed the interactions that I had was wearing sunglasses. I found that when you're wearing sunglasses, like the eyes are the entrance to the soul and all of this. Um, and really people they move out of your way. They don't mind they mind their business. They tend not to interact with you. And I found that for me, there was a really stark difference. Maybe it's because I just have kind eyes. I don't know. People just want to come
Hmm.
up and talk to me. But when I'm wearing shades, nobody bothers me. So that can be a little bit of a help. But anyway, that's my thoughts on safety.
That is interesting. I wonder, yeah, I'd like to
Try it
explore that. I
out,
wonder,
Jake.
yeah,
I'm
that is,
telling you.
yeah. I can see how that would be how that might be because yeah, they can't read you as well, so they can't
Right.
tell if you're a mark or not,
Yeah,
kind of
man.
this
It's
in the
like,
same way.
especially if you're coming into Chicago with, like, suburban energy, like, no offense, love you guys, I am you guys, but I can tell. And I think that, yeah, I don't know, someone with malicious intent is going to look for a target that seems easy. So if that's something that's important to you, maybe give it a try. I
Mhm.
just don't sometimes when I'd be rushing to work, I'd walk through the loop to work when I lived in West Loop. And at first, like, the first couple of weeks, it's like you're stopping by people, chatting, why not? But eventually, I just I wanna beeline. And so I
Yeah.
found when I had that window closed, I was able to just move more undisturbed.
Sunglasses, throw on the RBF a little bit,
There you
go
go.
about your
Yeah.
day. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Were you in the presidential towers?
I was.
Yeah,
I was.
yeah.
That's funny you got me, I know.
How'd
I
how'd
gave
I
you all
guess?
the I gave you the location. It's true.
Well,
It's
there's just only so many places that would meet that Venn diagram of that area and an apartment. There aren't that many big apartment buildings in that area, so
right.
and
Good
Ogilvy and
guess,
all
Jake.
that stuff, yeah. What's that?
I said good guess, good guess.
Yeah. So just living in Chicago in general, how would you say that has influenced sort of your professional and creative endeavors?
Oh, it's been a huge influence. Chicago feels small to me. I think uh, a big part of the reason that I started my career here was because I wanted to keep the momentum I had going from growing up in the area and going to school in the area. A lot of people obviously trickled down into the city. I felt like it would have been more hitting the ground running than maybe going to another big metropolitan area and having to kind of establish myself again. But I really underestimated that effect of Chicago. I think within creative disciplines, a lot of them don't tend to, in and of themselves, pay a super livable, comfortable wage, depending on what percentile performer you are. And so I say that because I think a lot of creative people have more than one job. And what's really fun about that is that people that I've met on photography events, I've also seen on set, and people who I've seen on set, I've worked with from the agency perspective. And all
Mhm.
of a sudden, the city begins to feel very connected to me. And I know that when I go to one area, that these people might be here, or this person might know somebody else. And additionally, I think that it's helped me build my brand a little bit more. It's confusing to do so many things and be like, wait, is Jay Towns the photographer or is he the writer guy? But overall, I think something that's been really valuable to me is to actually be able to be a connector of other people. So because of all the things that I've done and the people that I've gotten to meet and become acquainted with, um, people ask me, do you know a cinematographer that can do this work or somebody who can help me out with this brief? And it feels really good to be like, I just met a guy yesterday, when I was out at this bar who does this because Chicago's a place where, like, I feel like anyone could be anyone. And I think that's the same for other big metropolitan areas as well. But I think the difference in the Chicago vibe is that it feels very collaborative. It feels like we're all on the same team. that is something that I could not say about LA. I could not say that about New York. It feels like competition. And of course, there's competition no matter where you're going to go, but Chicago has a bit of that Midwest charm to it. It does.
Hmm.
And I think that I just feel a lot more comfortable here. I feel like I feel like people want me to win here, and it makes me feel like I want to pass that along as well.
Mm, very nice. People want you to win here. That's a nice review right there of the city.
Yeah. I
People
love
want you to win
Chicago.
here.
You got
Yeah,
a you got a Chicago fanboy on the podcast today for sure.
nice, good. And so all those things, all those different creative endeavors that you're doing, they all kind of inform each other, and probably because they're all kind of working the same parts of your brain, and they're probably all, I don't know. I'm kind of babbling a little bit now, but
No, I mean, you're right.
yeah.
I think especially, I mean, I love that acting and photography, I feel like are very tactical, and so is writing, but it's very, you show up, you do a thing, you provide that service, and you leave. And obviously, you could probably break down any job into something like that, but I feel like for me, those 2 things are things I feel so comfortable with and so confident in that I am allowed to kind of, I know I'm here to take pictures. Who else can I meet while I'm here? Or like what impression can I leave? What information can I gather? And what's really cool is then going into more of the cerebral work of doing like conceptual copywriting, coming up with campaigns, figuring out what resonates with certain target audiences, is that I get to draw on my experience of experiencing the culture, not just
Mhm,
observing it from afar, but having been there, having been to that neighborhood, having
mhm,
been to and interacted with people who really are about what we're talking about. I think not to get into this too much because I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but I do think that media can sometimes feel really removed from culture, which is super ironic, right? And so I think that it's, to me, I feel like a huge asset when it comes to bringing real lived experiences of creative types, which tend to be minorities, which tend to be people who are disenfranchised and are trying to use these creative platforms to get a message across to the majority. To be on their team when I'm doing my freelance work, and then to come into my full-time job and be like, this is actually what matters to
mm,
these people. Like this is, I it feels like an invaluable resource. And so I'm so happy to see, and that's the reason why I do all these things. Yeah, it's because it's never hurts to make a little bit more cash, but more than that, I think doing all of these things actually makes me better at all of
mhm.
those things. So
Yeah,
it feels like a
cycle.
cycle that feeds itself. Yeah.
Mhm, it's beautiful. What kind of what so, okay, you told me a little bit what kind of photography you're doing. What kind of acting are you doing, and what kind of advertising are you into? Are you doing kinda like, are you into any of the sort of like your classic, like, Second City IO kinda circuit? Or are you doing any of those? Or are you kinda more in, like, the TV stuff, or, like, what theater? What are you doing?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have done a little bit of everything. I kind of market myself in acting to be more of like a TV and film. I also recently started doing voiceover, which is very cool and fun. But I think for my lifestyle, theater does not really fit in a lot. It's just longer hours. It's a lot of rehearsal. And with a full-time job and things, it just doesn't usually work out very well. And then, but for TV and film, these projects can be done over a weekend. They shoot over time, over longer periods of time, but are a bit more flexible in their approach to scheduling. Um, I did my first commercial last October, which was fun. It was actually for Visit Illinois, which is like a
Mm,
tourism kind of campaign. So that
yeah,
was super fun. That was the first commercial I did, and I got to go to different parts of Illinois I'd never heard of and do fun outdoor
mm,
activities. So that was really cool. And then on the advertising side, I just made a pivot. So I used to work in B2C consumer goods in mostly beer and candy. So I worked on like Miller Lite, Coors Light, Skittles, Starburst, things like that, some alcohol, and yeah, things like that. And that was really fun. Those kinds of ads are really fun. It's kind of, it's
mhm,
about consumption, and just good vibes. I think some more interesting work that I'm into now, as I've kind of changed agencies, changed accounts that I'm working on. And now I'm going to be trying to be careful about the details, but I work on a healthcare account, and it's very fun to think about. It's completely different conceptually. People don't need Starburst, but if you want some, let's give it a brand voice, right? Whereas
mhm,
like working with medicine and on the diseases and illnesses that I work on, they're very serious. And so people know that they need this. The question is like, what is the impression that we're leaving you with? What is the tone? What is the tonality of this? And how are we making sure that we're being optimistic while also being realistic? So it's very sobering, it's very intense, but it feels like it's feeding a bit more of a true human need which is great. People in advertising always say we're not saving the world here. And I think that that's true. And it's good to remind oneself of. I think that for most people, it just makes them feel better about maybe being not needing to be super stressed about some of the deadlines and things. Work for everybody can seem like end all be all, but you're not going to kill somebody with a bat. But I do think that it feels like to me, so the downside is low. It's not the worst that can happen is just not that bad. But to me, I am a product of conscious media consumption, and I care about things that I like because I know what they stand for. And I think that we as a culture are starting to expect more from brands to kind of put their money where their mouth is. And I love the upside potential of advertising. I think that at its lowest level, you're selling something worth $2 and you're making 5. And it's like, this is capitalism's core. But I think the potential that it can have to just like films and any other form of art, but with a much more structured approach to create cultural change, to bring awareness to issues that people didn't know about, and overall to change like our social fabric. Like that is what I'm really interested in. So
Mm.
even though the work that I did before and the work that I'm doing now feel very different in concept, or in content, I would say in concept, they are very similar. And that's why I like doing the work that I do.
Hmm. Just gonna let all that sink in. That was great.
Yeah, no, I
I have
appreciate it. I
I have
know I
no
kind of
follow up on that. That's
went
just
off
yeah,
on it.
that's a great way to go to think about what you do. I mean, yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, yeah, the media that we consume does matter. It does influence us and on a on a individual level and then on a cultural level on up from there. So I mean, it's hard to say that this stuff doesn't. You're just selling a widget, but you know,
Mhm.
it can and could and should be more than that if it can be, I guess, you know. So
Yeah. I love
yeah,
that.
that's cool. Have you noticed much of an art scene specifically in Lincoln Park? Or have you been there long enough to really take much of that in?
You know, it's funny, I always tell my friends, like, I just moved to Lincoln Park. I can't keep using the word just. It was in July of last year. It just
Mhm.
feels like that. Life moves so fast. But I think that, to answer your question, I've not done my due diligence on the art scene in Lincoln Park. I'm sure there is one, and I don't wanna speak on behalf of it. What I will say is that I've heard of some really fun things going on. I know there's the Old Town School of Music there's one, I believe, on Armitage that I hear people having fun performances at. There are a lot of just little shops and boutiques that are like music and art stores, usually managed by the owner, and
Mhm.
a lot of self-produced products. And I think that that's such a really cool energy. I think that's like I was saying, I think that's what makes Lincoln Park a bit more personable. There's a bit more of that mom and pop shop feel to a lot of the businesses here. And honestly, yeah, I can't speak too much to the art scene, music scene within Lincoln Park specifically, but the only thing
Mhm.
I'll add is that they have some great venues in Lincoln Park, and it's nice to be
Yeah.
conveniently located where I can walk to them. Lincoln Hall is great. I don't know if Riviera is around here, I forget, but there's some cool ones.
Uptown, it's not far.
Okay, yeah.
Couple miles.
But I think I saw one of my favorite artists named Bruno Major. Uh he performed somewhere close to here. Maybe I'm gonna stop guessing because I'm gonna get it wrong. But, yeah, Lincoln Park's got a lot of cool music venues, so it's cool to be able to
Yeah. Is there anything about either Lincoln Park as specifically or Chicago as a whole that has surprised you since living here? Or maybe like a misconception that people have that
Oh, well, I mean, I'll definitely start with a misconception. I mean, growing up in the suburbs and really anywhere that's not actually living in Chicago, you get a very different picture of Chicago than the one that truly exists. But I'm gonna add some nuance to that further. So first, I think what people think about Chicago is that it's crime-ridden, that it is, basically unlivable. There was always this joke about Chirac, this is a place where it's basically a war zone. Could not be further from the truth. No matter where you are in Chicago, there's always a story to be told. And usually the people that are fighting are not fighting each other. They're fighting against the systems that have been pushing them down and forcing them into situations that would make people behave in a way that is not seemly, that is not supposed to be projected on TV in a manner that makes you scared about living in Chicago. But the reality is, just like any other metropolitan area in America, unfortunately, there's a huge discrepancy, huge, especially Chicago. There's a huge discrepancy between the people who earn the most and live in the really small, secluded areas like River North, anywhere near the Loop, Lincoln Park included. Um, and then you have, the rest 80% of Chicago living under like the median for a household in the United States.
Yep,
It's insane and it's really
yep.
not cool. Anyway, so I'm just like anybody who's living in that situation, if that's your reality that you grow up in, the social norms that you have are just going to be different than those who grew up privileged like I did. A lot of the people that I interact with, everybody living in my neighborhood, clearly. So there's that. But then I also think that past that, that there's such a beauty in Chicago. And I when I to live in the suburbs, I would tell people that weren't from Illinois that I was from Chicago. And people from Chicago get really pissed at you when you do that. And I didn't used to understand why. But I think that now that I finally have lived in Chicago, of course, into like the bougiest areas, right? So it's like, who are you to say? But like I said, that's why I'm so thankful for the experiences that I have with my artistic pursuits because I've been able to actually touch some grass, touch
Hmm.
some concrete, talk to some people who have lived the experiences that people talk about. And what I love about Chicago is that there is this camaraderie and people from Chicago feel so beholden to it. I think because there's such a unique sense of familiarity, but also difference per neighborhood. The beautiful thing and the terrible thing about Chicago is that your lived experience is going to be vastly different depending on what neighborhood you live in. But because of that, I think that Chicago has become a hub for so many communities to feel a sense of kinship within their neighborhood. So places that have been gentrified like West Loop and Lincoln Park, yeah, I don't think that there's anything that's unifying me personally to my neighbor's culture just because we live here. I don't think that there's personally, I don't find that to be the case. And I think that's the nature of gentrified areas. I don't think that this was how these places were meant to stay, but the reality is this is how they are. And I'm benefiting from it because I want to live in a place where I have convenience. But
Hmm.
there are areas in Chicago that have retained their culture or have developed a culture of their own over time that I know people that live in that feel really special to them. Places like Pilsen for the Hispanic community, especially, that they are able to have an area that they do literally know their neighbor and that you can have a sense of home away from home, especially as Chicago, not to get into it, has become, a sanctuary city for better or for worse, and that people are able to find within their areas. When I was in West Loop, I lived right next to Greek Town. There's Little Italy, Chinatown, like the list goes on. And I think that every big city has things like this, but Chicago people, I think, really cherish that about their neighborhoods. And I think that's really special. I don't think that that's something that you find in many other places, if any other place in the world, really, because the US is already a melting pot. And then when you look at the most diverse cities that like Chicago, which how many of these cities are really creating these areas for different people to authentically live their culture? I don't
Right.
know I don't know if there are many. I don't know actually because 'cause I'm not an expert on this, but I haven't found many, and so I love that about Chicago, and I think that that's the most beautiful part about it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'd imagine parts of New York, your Brooklyn, places like that probably have
Right, right.
places that are comparable and whatnot. But yeah, I do know what you mean. I mean, my experience of New York is like that is like a true melting pot where it's
Mm,
just like no matter where you are going to see every kind of person, just like no matter where you look. But Chicago is a little different, where it's like instead of like it being a melting pot, I describe it as kind of like a stove with a bunch of pots on it. And
yeah,
like
exactly.
and like every once in a while you'll have some something in one pot might splash into another pot, but for the most part, you kinda it's a little more siloed, which is, like, not great for lots of reasons, but it does, on the other side of that coin, kinda does create, like, the opportunity for what you were talking about to where, you can really go into an area and truly feel like you're in another country for a little while. I
Yeah,
mean, it's that
yeah.
part of it is cool for visitors, and I would imagine the people living there alike. I mean, maybe some good and bad to both of those, I'm sure that's the
Absolutely
case,
some
but
there's
yeah,
nuance in all of this, and I'm
right.
no sociological expert, like, the fact of
Right.
the matter is, though, Chicago is a place, just like any place, but, these cities that have these histories are the lived Chicago experience is inexplicably linked with its history. There was redlining happening here, there was
Oh, yeah.
segregation happening here, there is a bunch of gentrification happening of these neighborhoods, and this is what we have because of it. So I just try to look the positive side of it and see what 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 have we gained because of this, and what can we focus on that is on that positive side. But that's absolutely true, and I love your metaphor. It's way better than melting pot. I'm definitely gonna use that now.
Feel free. Yeah. Alright, I know you got, just a few more minutes. I have just couple 2 more things. So, basically,
Okay.
this the last kinda neighborhood-centric question is this bottom line, in summary, why do you think somebody should, A, want to live in Chicago? And then, B, if they go that far, why do you think they would wanna live in Lincoln Park?
Chicago is the best value of a large city to live in the United States. I'll just leave it at that. Values subjective to everyone, but I believe that to be true. And Lincoln Park, I think if you're a high net worth family that would like to live in a city that feels welcoming to a family, then I would live here. If you are a young person who would like to experience living near other young people, I think that's a good idea. And if you enjoy nature and you like being in an area that has more of a tie to nature, there's a zoo near the lake, just kind of more outdoor kind of aesthetics, then I think Lincoln Park's a great place to be in. Lastly, I'd say it's a pretty centrally located area. I think what I like for me,
Mhm.
again, location is the biggest thing that I think about when I'm living in a place. And what I mean is just like topographically, what is it near? How does my life live? I own a car, thankfully, but I find myself 95% of the time just taking public transit because I'm near it and it's
Mhm.
convenient. Lincoln Park is a super centrally located neighborhood, and I would highly suggest if you've got ties to different parts of the city, you want to be in a place where you can kind of do anything. Lincoln Park is a great area to find yourself in.
Definitely, yeah. Public transit in Lincoln Park is so easy. You got all the red line stops, brown line stops, Diversey bus, Fullerton bus, the 141 that goes down to the loop. I mean, yeah, there's so many ways to get around. So that's a good call out. Even biking along the trails and all that. So
Yeah.
we didn't spend a lot of time talking about transit and just how people actually live and get around. But yeah, that's definitely something worth calling out. Cool. And then you last but certainly not least, I would like to for the people here to know if they want to get in touch with you or learn more about you, what are the best ways to do that?
Feel free to get in touch with me anywhere on the internet. If you look up J Towns, that's JAYTOWNS. I'm chronically online, so all of my social profiles are populating. But Instagram, LinkedIn, great places to start, both at J Towns, JAYTOWNS. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you there. IMDb, perhaps, if you would like to check
IMDb.
that out as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Not much going on there as of late. But anyway, yeah, happy to
But
connect.
you're on there. You're in the room and that's half the battle. So
There we
there you
go.
go.
There we go. I love it. Glass half full with Jake.
Yeah. That's all I got, man. Thank you so much for your time. Anything else that I missed? Anything that I should have asked or that you want to throw out there, promote anything? It's okay if not.
No, yeah, I thought this was great. I really appreciate the time, and I enjoyed the conversation.
I did as well. All right. Well, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah. Catch you later.